blockchains. So I'd like to introduce our next panel, and this is our last slot for the day. So we're going to take a look at how the future of digital and mobile money could be a potentially better solution than cash. I'd like to introduce Ben Parker from IRIN News and his panelists.
Good afternoon. If any of you are still awake, we're very glad you're still here. Obviously, they tend to save the best for last, these kind of things. And, look forward to your active participation to make sure this kicks off and wraps things up in an appropriately exciting way. We've got a great panel here. Our interpretation of the future is perhaps a little bit idiosyncratic, but we thought we'd discuss the use cases, a phrase perhaps I've heard more today than I'd like to, the use cases for the rest of the world, because that perhaps in one sense is the future. We've got, as you've already heard, billions of people who are pretty much unconnected to the formal finance system, billions of people unconnected, for that matter, to a telephone network, and you've got quite a lot of people who are nearly connected to both. And my panel today includes people working in mobile industry and in the aid and humanitarian and development sector, and in an exciting disruptive application in the field of remittances. Also in the aid and development sector, which is sometimes the most common way in which the rich world perceives the developing world, there is in there too, it's undergoing a revolution of its own. And to a certain extent, cash now is regarded as an appropriate way to help people rather than shipping them bags of rice or American grain or whatever.
The best way.
Used to be the way. So it's an interesting intersection there. And I hope Alan here, Grundy from the International Rescue Committee, is going to talk about South Sudan. As a story I can't resist telling. That I used to work in South Sudan where the rebels were in control, and they decided they needed their own currency, so they printed it in Nairobi. And then when the printer asked to be paid, they tried to pay the printer with the currency. So there are some edge cases here to look forward to. So I've got Alan, Grundy, Wale, Ayeni from Orange, Silicon Valley, and Bill Barhydt from Abra on the far right. I'm going to ask them to kick off with their own problems and solutions, and then we'll see where it goes. If you do want to ask questions and you can figure out this thing, they may pop up on here also. So go ahead, Alan.
Sure. So my name's Alan. I'm the Emergency Response Team Coordinator for Cash and Voucher Programming for the International Rescue Committee. So what that means is I'm one of the guys that they send out during an emergency to figure out how exactly to deliver aid most efficiently to people in need. The International Rescue Committee is an organization that works in about 40 countries, providing assistance to people that are suffering from a conflict or a disaster or in the process of migration. What I'm presently working on is creating this global payments toolbox so that the IRC is able to respond to emergency or recovery operations in a very fast time, hopefully within 72 hours, with cash assistance. And we're working with different third-party providers that do remittances, prepaid cards, and mobile money transfers across borders. It's a really hard it's a very difficult process to move forward because there's not that many providers that do that. This is the reason why I've kind of started researching a little bit into digital currencies as another way to distribute cash. We work in pretty difficult areas, certain areas where there's no financial infrastructure whatsoever. I'll give you some examples: Syria, South Sudan, as you mentioned, Libya, Yemen. Most recently, I got back from the rebel-held areas of Ukraine. Places where delivering cash, armed actors are readily available. We look for innovative ways to distribute money. However, the traditional, let's say, financial systems that we're accustomed to, banks, aren't readily available. Anyways, we have people that are suffering, food insecure. If anybody's looking at the news right now, we have hundreds of thousands of people migrating through Greece, into the Caucasus, up through Austria, Hungary, and Germany. These are people that are carrying physical cash. They're coming from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. They're not walking around with a prepaid card or with a credit card or a bank account that works in their country and they're just transferring money. They're carrying around cash. So is that really the best way to do it? And how do we assist them? How do we support them? That's what I'm working on.
Thank you very much. Wale.
Yeah, my name is Wale Ayeni. I'm a principal in Orange, Silicon Valley. I lead investments in kind of seed stage investments for Orange in the US. And I'm in New York. I'll explain what Orange is. Orange is a large telco, large carrier based out of Paris. We have about 240 million subscribers globally. Out of those 240 million, 100 million actually based in Africa and some parts of the Middle East. The thing that's quite interesting with Orange and MNO is that most MNOs are experts in a particular market. So you have MNOs that understand the Western market, like Verizon, Sprint. And you have MNOs that understand frontier markets, like Bharti, Airtel, Etisalat, MTN. The unique thing about Orange is that we're both in developed markets in Europe and we're also in frontier markets. So we're able to see the differences and the commonalities as well. There's been a lot of talk in this panel about financial inclusion and last mile. Orange is actually in the last mile. You go to Niger, Mali, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, a lot of markets that people don't understand. We are there and we've been there for a while. When you talk about things being digital, particularly in frontier markets, people are getting digital via their mobile phones first. So once we are already there, and the reason we're trying to understand blockchain is figuring out what comes next. I was just talking to Alan earlier on in the history of kind of money moving digital. If you look at Western markets, most people had a debit card or a credit card before you had a cell phone. So there was a reason why wallets came after the cards. But if you go to a lot of frontier markets, people don't even have bank accounts. People don't have debit cards, but they do have a phone. And the phone provides connectivity. And we're trying to understand the ecosystem, invest in startups that are trying to also understand the ecosystem and see what kind of value-added services we can layer on top just pure connectivity that we already provide in frontier markets. And that's what I do in Silicon Valley.
Thanks very much. Bill?
Sure. I'm Bill Barhydt. I'm the founder and CEO of Abra. So before I tell you the nuts and bolts of what Abra does, I think maybe it's more useful to understand why we started Abra. We started Abra to solve, in terms of explaining it, a very simple problem. And that is, I want to be able to offer a service for the first time that anybody can use to send money from one phone number in the world to any other phone number in the world the way we would send a text message today. There are probably 60 interesting apps that you can download on iOS or Android to send myriad photos, text messages, video, et cetera, but try downloading one single app that you could use to send money to any phone number that would have the same app in any country in the world, and you can't do it. And so this is something that I've tried to figure out for a very long time. And in the last kind of 18 months, because of now the proliferation of Bitcoin and blockchain technology and smart contracts, we believe we have finally cracked the nut on how to do this. So what Abra does is it is a smartphone application that you can install just like any other smartphone app on iOS or Android. It uses, unbeknownst to the consumer, Bitcoin blockchain technology to store funds in fiat, meaning the consumer sees dollars, euros, pesos, Philippine pesos, whatever. But what's happening in the background is that the consumer is actually storing a combination of Bitcoin and smart contracts whose mark-to-market is actually the fiat value that they see in the balance on the screen. More importantly, we fix that value to the fiat balance via those smart contracts. Then we allow the consumer to send that money to any phone number in the world, which solves the problem we were trying to solve. And then the third problem is we've figured out how to enable consumers to get the money on and off their smartphone in the first place, whether it's here in New York City, where most of you would be using a bank account, or in developing markets like Wale was talking about, where people are using cash. We've developed the concept of what we call the Abra teller, which the easiest way to understand it is Uber for money. Basically, any small business owner or large business owner can buy and sell digital currency via their storefront or on the streets, the same way they buy and sell airtime today, and that provides liquidity into the system. And all the consumer sees is that they have a balance in real money on their phone. They can send it to any phone number in the world, and they can quickly get the money on and off their phone. We're currently in private beta with the service. We're about to go public with the service in a few weeks in our first 2 launch countries. We've had a tremendous reaction to the service, in large part due to this community of Bitcoin enthusiasts who've helped get the word out, with teller registrations in over 80 countries. And yeah, so that's it.
That's huge. For those of you who read the news, I think Bill had some good news today to share, but we won't embarrass him with that now. We were talking earlier with Wale that certainly in Africa, the distinction between a bank and a mobile phone company is becoming a bit blurred. And I wonder where the remittance business fits into Orange's plans in the market.
The reason we talked about that is that there's this definition of what a bank is. And I think particularly when you go to frontier markets, there's room to change what that definition actually means. People think, and I talked to Bill about this a while ago, when people say financial inclusion, a lot of people think about giving you a bank account. But fundamentally, it's about providing you services like credit, insurance that you could not get access to before. So I think that notion of what a bank is, in our view, is quite different. Because if we can give you access to the same service and not have a bank in between, we already have the customers, we have the network, we can provide similar services that the banks actually in frontier markets cannot do, because when you go to the frontier markets, there's no really banks in the rural areas. It's hard to put an ATM structure in the rural areas. But if we can provide you a way to get the same access to financial services without actually having to use a bank, it's a place we spend a lot of our time, and not actually only in frontier markets. I think this announcement is not new by any means. Like 2-3 months ago, the CEO of the company, Stephen Richard, announced that in Paris, which is kind of in the developed market, we have 27 million subscribers in France. We have about 1,000 retail stores in France. And we decided we're going to actually apply for a banking license, because what the banks do is they provide compliance. And if we're able to do that, we can start providing other financial services without actually needing a bank. And I think when people think about what the future of blockchain might be, it might be definitions will start to get blurred, particularly in the digital world, about who is the bank and who is the telco.
And the model for Abra is peer-to-peer. It's not. If Alan needs to pay 1,000 people in Ukraine, can he use your system?
He can. So I tried it that way. I'm chairman of Boom, where we, in Haiti, opened up an operating subsidiary and tried to bank. I think we banked about 30,000 consumers using USSD, and honestly found that the consumers didn't care. They were after the cash that they were going to get after they finished the process. And they're happy to use that process to continually get money off the phone. But from a humanitarian perspective, in that kind of worst case scenario, they wanted cash as quickly as possible. And so the bank account model became a very lightweight way, ironically, to fulfill compliance requirements, which is absurd when you break it down, that's what we were forced to do. in places where there were no streets, and we'd have to say, you know, the agent is make a left at the second tree, and then, by the way, we've got to put you through a KYC process. You know, what are you talking about? I just want my money. And so try to scale that, and that's what I've been thinking about is how do you basically facilitate a model that is Metcalfe's diagram of people who want to transact, but not Metcalfe's diagram of compliance complexity, which is what this could become if it's not done right. And so, to your point, the only way to solve that problem is to have no financial intermediary in terms of holding funds, and no financial intermediary in terms of remitting funds or transacting funds, whether it's a person to person or a person to merchant makes no difference. And that's why we believe that the only model for doing that is peer-to-peer using the blockchain technology. So we looked at everything. A couple of people from Abra here. We looked at not only Bitcoin blockchain, we looked at Ripple, we looked at creating our own, we looked at sidechain models, and there was really only one way to do it because we need a liquid currency that has a reasonably stable market cap, at least relative to where Bitcoin is today. And it's the only way to do what we're doing. So it is incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we have that peer-to-peer model that's stable and growing, because you can't have companies like Abra without it. Whether the consumer knows that they're using Bitcoin or not, whether they understand, whether they fully appreciate the difference between peer-to-peer or peer-to-peer versus Western Union or Bank of America or not, we need that infrastructure in place to enable this type of application.
So, Alan, how do you send people money?
Well, you know, when I was introduced to Bill recently, and Wally explained what it was, the technology, I'm not a techie, so it kind of went over my head. But the simple math.
I've already broken the iPad, by the way, so you may have to use your voices for questions.
The simple idea of being able to transfer money across borders digitally using blockchain, what Abra is presenting basically, is really interesting. I perked up because presently we're looking at this whole peer-to-peer network or peer-to-peer use with mobile money. The problem with mobile money is that in one country you can have, like for example, Nigeria, you have, how much was the number recently? 22, you said?
Yeah.
22 different mobile money products. In Philippines you have 2. In Sierra Leone you have 4, I think it was. In Liberia, you have 1 that does mobile money. So anyways, but the point is that this whole, and you're gonna have to help me with the word because I always mess it up, interoperability is always a problem between, I always mess it up.
You're gonna be using that.
Yeah, I'm building my capacity here. So, this function, or being able to use peer-to-peer, like let's say we distribute a cash transfer to 1,000 beneficiaries in Nigeria, each one's going to have their own mobile money, like operator, right? One's going to be Orange, and another one's going to be MTN or whatever, and they're not going to be able to go or transfer money between themselves. So staying digital it's a barrier. Keeping the money digital is not possible. What Abra is presenting is, forget who cares what the mobile network operator is. Sorry, Wally, but who cares? Now you're actually transferring money, and then you can create this peer-to-peer network between tellers and users. Basically, I'm summarizing what Bill said. And I'm sorry, but I just want to point out that IRC comes into countries where there is no network, like I mentioned, right? Like some countries that don't have anything. And what happens in that situation to do a cash transfers is that we need to create our own network. We need like an internal network. It's called the electronic voucher system or just a voucher system. So we come in, we identify vendors that are interested in participating, that trust us, that we're going to pay them back, and beneficiaries that are like, what is this piece of paper or electronic voucher you're giving me? But okay, this gives me goods, I'm happy. And we tell them, go to these vendors that are participating. We're actively signing up vendors. And we create this infrastructure, this financial infrastructure, even though it's completely based off of IRC, it's working. Beneficiaries are going to vendors are selling to beneficiaries, and then vendors accumulate all these electronic vouchers, or paper vouchers, which is data or paper, and then come to IRC saying, pay me, give me money for all of this stuff that happened. If that is a logistical nightmare, I'll tell you. I've done it many times. It's very difficult, and it's annoying, and you have always problems. The possibility that this could be entirely based on a digital currency just facilitates my life and the lives of my coworkers a lot more. And so it's very interesting.
But just to take a reality break for a second, I mean, the challenge, I mean, what you guys do is unbelievable to me, having spent a lot of time in places like Haiti after the earthquake and the Guatemalan border. But I mean, think about what's required, though, to do what we do. Yeah, you can do it. I've done it. I've used Abra on a $40 Android phone, but there still has to be a data network in place, right? You have to publish a transaction somewhere, right? So, you know, having even a stable edge connection in a lot of the markets or countries, places that you're dealing with is problematic. A lot of people who are buying Android phones, because the carriers don't sell feature phones, because the $40 Android phone is actually what the feature phone used to cost. They buy the Android phone, but then turn the data connection off, right? And then they'll go to an internet cafe or you know, borrow some data from someone else by sharing making a hotspot out of their phone. These are big problems that have to be addressed, right? I mean, Internet.org is trying to address it. Unfortunately, the biggest app of that right now is Facebook. You know, I would like to see stuff like that be used for more constructive applications in the education and financial services arenas, and that would, I think, make a huge difference to this planet, right? An Internet.org model for, I hate the word financial inclusion, but for lack of a better word, financial inclusion, to me, would add way more value than trying to build an identity system for people right now. And so, but you know, until we start to solve some of those basic infrastructure problems, I think that unfortunately we're going to see a lot of these applications relegated to the middle of the pyramid, and you know. So I hope we can figure that out quickly.
Oh, we'll continue working on that. That's okay. Yeah. And just to add on to that, a follow-up, I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, I just spent 2 days with the Makeathon with the crowd, and they were talking about different solutions to all of these problems, you know, financial inclusion and all that. And you know, I was one of the judges, and they were presenting to me, and I had no idea what people were talking about. I was like, what is erythium? I have no idea. So I had to look it up and Google people are talking. But you know, the only question that I asked, and I'm hoping he's here, was, well, you know, like in one of the solutions was, well, what if I don't have internet? And he's like, oh, well, you have to have internet. I was like, well, then you just, you know, you cut out a lot of the population, right? Like, that's just a lot of the world's population that are in need. So yeah. So
well, actually, sorry, you say that, but I mean, I don't know, how many of you have ever heard of use FireChat? Right? Well, a bunch of hands. So figured this audience would know FireChat. So it's an application that basically can use myriad P2P technologies to automatically borrow internet connectivity from someone else. And so in places like Burning Man, right, where, you know, most people won't have an internet connection, you can actually chat effectively with people using this technology. And so, you know, there's new protocols in the Bitcoin world, like the Lightning Network, which I'm sure the techies here are familiar with, which haven't been implemented yet, but show potential for packaging up some of these smaller transactions and then combined with some of the FireChat-like technologies, which could actually solve some of these problems, but they're not there yet.
Wally,
yeah.
So Abra's world is a world free of regulation where all the risk appears to be on the P's and not on Abra. How do you feel about this as a competitor?
No, I to your points initially that I wanted to answer to is that when you come particularly to the Western world and a lot of people having ideas about frontier markets, a lot of people have ideas without having spent time in frontier markets. And you know, to what Bill was saying is, even if the app and your idea is great, you have to spend time in frontier markets to really understand what the challenges are. And besides that, how people interact with technology. So those two things, there has to be an understanding before you ever say you're going to build an app that's going to solve the world's problem. But there's a huge opportunity out there. To your point that said, if I want to transfer money between my phone and somebody else's phone, you shouldn't care what the network is. Just like if you're paying for dinner, as long as there's a Visa stamp on your card, you don't really care what bank account the merchant has. And Visa created a network, and that network is built for the banks. And let's say, you know, that's for the first 1 billion people. The way, in my view, the way the remaining 5 to 6 billion people are going to transmit money is going to be very, very vastly different from the Visa network that we have now. And that is not an easy problem to figure out. It's at early stages. Blockchain is one of the technologies. To your connectivity point, there's a lot of new technologies in Silicon Valley where I spend a lot of my time. There are things like Mimosa networks, our Metis network, people trying to reconfigure what actually the network looks like. So that infrastructure, I'm a firm believer in human ingenuity. I think that infrastructure is going to get built out. But it's not uhuru yet, to borrow an African term. It's not there yet. There's still a lot of work that has to be done. But I think the future is going to be very, very vastly different from what we have today.
Alan, final things. Most of the questions, by the way, are about the regulatory implications and whether or not Bitcoin can handle the volume of your monster application. But I think we've covered quite a lot of that. So final thoughts. Where is the future?
Oh, you know what I was thinking, like, while he was talking, I'm interested to see how what Abra's product and then what Wally's product interact. How do they migrate together? How do you go from mobile money wallets into digital currencies? Yeah. And we'll reap the benefits of this. So thank you, both of you, for doing this. But that's kind of what I'm now interested to talk to you about in the green room later.
Wally.
So, like I said, we have a view in the firm that the future is going to be very, very different. We think we have a head start because we're already in those markets. We're already the first. When people want to become digital, they probably go through a network that is mobile. It's either Orange or Safaricom or all those networks out there in the last mile. So we already interact digitally with our customers. We're trying to figure out what can we do to fast track that future. And part of that is we're doing, we started investing in early stage companies, blockchain as well. And I think there was an announcement today. We actually invested in Chain. People don't notice that, but the investors in that round was NASDAQ, Visa, Fiserv, Capital One, and Orange. So these are all financial services and one telco. And the reason we're in this is because we want to learn. We don't think that the banks are, we don't think they know more than we do in this new space, and we want to fully understand that. And besides that, we have something called Chain First, which we also announced in San Francisco, which is we're starting up like a sandbox environment. So when people like Alan has a problem, he comes to the organization called Chain First. We have engineers, we know startups, and we try to marry them together to solve your problems that you might have. So I do VC, so I'm kind of pitching here. I'm pitching to Alan to talk to me later. I'm pitching to Bill for his next round, so maybe we can invest as well. But yeah, that's kind of how we see the future. We don't think we know it all. We think we're going to have to talk to a lot of people in the ecosystem.
Bill. Your future? How is it?
Well, I'm working 18 hours a day right now, so
busy.
Yeah, look, we've started a really long marathon. I just finished an around-the-world trip. We're building out Abra's what we call, it's not a term I don't think I've used publicly before, but our master teller network in lots of countries. And the master tellers are large partners who bring significant retail footprint to the table to allow us to deploy quickly in different markets. We've got forward teams working on this already in different places, and this is a multi-year exercise for us. We're not going to be, Uber wasn't what we all know as Uber 6 months ago. It took them years to have what they call driver liquidity in as many, I think they're to 50 countries now, and the way I look at it is, the ATM footprint globally is a few million machines. The Western Union or MoneyGram footprint, even including China and India, is probably in the order of 600,000 agents now. And I think that the Abra footprint to do things correctly probably needs to be more on the order of the global airtime agent footprints, which is probably 20 to 30 million people, or locations, not people. And so that's our goal, is to have build massive liquidity. So whether you're receiving a remittance in a village or getting off a cruise ship with digital currency on your phone. Either way, you can find a teller immediately. And so, like I said, for us, the future is a long, hopefully not totally slow marathon, but we're in for the long haul either way.
All right. Thank you all.
Good job.
All right, thank you very much, guys. That was a wonderful last panel, and that brings our event to a close. So we're just going to take a quick look at the poll. Thanks, guys. Let's have a look at the polls. So it's 35% showing that we